I just have to say that 4 months ago when Patty asked me to do this talk, I said, yeah, sure, of course, I talk about this all the time. But in 4 months, I've been learning so much about what you're all going through and what you all stand for. I feel a little inadequate up here, but I'm still going to persevere and have a go and probably find a few changes since I first wrote this. But I am... Oh, what happened? Can we go back? No. It's just moving itself forward. Oh, I'll just keep talking anyway. The first thing I wanted to talk about was actually how I started a pretty rocky road in the early days in my life, talking about powerlessness and fearlessness and fear. And it wasn't until I was 11 when I escaped a pretty violent childhood that I ended up in a boarding school. And I was so excited to be there. It was really lovely to be in a friendly place, and we've heard a bit about crappy boarding schools lately in the news, but mine was fantastic. But the funny thing to me was, coming from the world I'd come from, that there were people here bullying other people. And I found myself by complete accident rather than design.
Just give it.
Oh, sorry. Wrong side.
And there's your arrow key. Just there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I found myself by complete accident rather than design standing between the bullies and the bullied, because I didn't expect, I wasn't going to be bullied. I didn't know what it was. I thought that after the childhood that I've been through so far, that it absolutely everyone else was happy and friendly and looking after each other. And that was my first introduction to bullying. A bit later on, a few years later, I was lucky enough to be enrolled in the Royal Brisbane Hospital as a trainee nurse, and that's something I'd always wanted to do. And in those days, that's the olden days, in the 60s, nursing was a 4-year course. It wasn't a diploma, or it wasn't a degree, but it was a 4-year live-in course on $14 a fortnight. And of course, the first thing you got to do was everything everyone else didn't want to do, and that was, for me, cleaning pans and looking after the pan room. And I was so excited and thrilled about being in this career I wanted to be in, that I wanted to be best at everything. So I was really good at pans, and to these days, like this day, I can see the lovely shiny pans. But the point I wanted to make is that also the first department I was allocated to was what was the 60s excuse for palliative care department. And I was not only good at pans, I was very fast. So I had ended up with some spare time, and I liked to go and talk to and learn from these amazing people who were struggling through their life at the time, and just to see what else I could do. But to this day, I have this memory of this voice saying, "Nurse Birchall, if you haven't got anything better to do, go back and clean the pan room again." And that was powerlessness. That was the system just going crazy. And even then, at the age of 17, I thought, I've got better things to do with my life. I'm not going to conform to this. So I have had a struggle all my life, and we were talking about things that we got into trouble with at boarding school earlier today. But really, I moved on about a couple of decades later, and I found myself as a general manager of a medical practice in Melbourne. And Don, your presentation last year impacted on me when you were talking about ethics versus commercialism in the late 80s, and we found that medical practices were about to be able to market themselves, and it was the beginning of the marketing of medicine. And so that made me think, when I listened to what you were saying, that was sort of the beginning of me needing to review what I'm talking about, because actually I'm a communication strategist. In private enterprise, that's communication and marketing strategist, which means what am I doing in my life, and how am I managing that, and am I really taking responsibility for my part in ethics? I think I am, because I've been fighting since I was born, I think, for equity and to be heard and to be looking after the things that I really believe in passionately. I have got something written here, haven't I? So I better click through and see where we're up to. Sorry. So my work is about developing communication strategies in the health sector now. Here we are all these years later. And consultation and engaging cohorts across organisations, digitising policies and procedures and facilitating communication between administrators, practitioners and technical operators. You learn a lot when you grow up in the gutter, in the street. You learn about feeling, listening and being able to work with people. And I think I'm really bloody lucky. But now I have a whole new interest, and that is to do whatever I can do to work with you guys and to see if the work and the experience that I have will assist. There's a whole lot of other things around facilitating change, but I suppose I'm with the other speakers that have spoken today. Leadership, in my experience, I've worked in a lot of large hospitals and I find myself in boardrooms and with senior managers making decisions about strategies in their hospitals, and communication is really an important aspect. But I find that there are sort of silos throughout some of these organisations where people aren't actually communicating with each other, and decisions are being made because of financial constraints and things. And I often wonder if the executives in large organisations have an understanding of what practitioners actually go through. We were talking earlier today about, it's all very well to have systems and procedures. I mean, that's what I do too. And I have actually run engineering businesses and worked across all sorts of private enterprise as well. And of course, systems and procedures and occupational health and safety and all these structures are really very, very important. And when you've got a team, if you're going to have health and productivity, talking about commercialisation, we of course need to have these. I've got a son who no other mother would really want to have because he's just an extreme sports person, and when he's not dirt bike racing and skiing down enormous mountains all over the world, he's working out on oil rigs in a safety team where he's the one that abseils down the scaffolding if someone falls off and puts them in the helicopter. But he insists that they have the safest work environment. I think we heard earlier today about the considerations in construction and how organisations really have to take so much care. But my son says he's the safest person in the world. I'm just the mother, all these miles away, worrying about him, I suppose. But when you think about it, there is, of course, in every hospital I work in, there's occupational health and safety, there's systems and procedures, there's notices on the nose boards. I can remember once I was working for a bunch of surgeons in Melbourne, and we were looking at ways to improve communication, and that included actually putting that stage appropriate electronic communication tools into the practices. I think, does anyone remember the family medicine program back in the 80s? It was the 4-year postgraduate program for people wanting to work in family medicine. And I think that in those days we were actually filming practitioners communicating with their patients and looking at ways that could support them. What I wanted to say about all the systems and procedures, to me that's very neat and tidy. I can get things done, make sure we get results, but to me, after listening to all of you, I've got a feeling it's just like the perfect pan room. But what about all those feelings? You know, I've got this picture in my mind of a duck on the water and sails across and everybody's looking at this neat and tidy system. But what about all those legs going underneath in all directions trying to make it move? I can't put a finger on it, but it's some kind of gut feeling of pain listening to all of you and thinking there has to be a way we can find to express this and to get this situation understood by the community at large, and then to break it into, where's that elephant? We need that elephant up there. How do you eat an elephant? In bite-sized pieces. Let's modularise the project, and let's look at taking little pieces at a time, small steps. I don't know whether, you know, we've got to try and put a finger on this and name it and own it and be able to communicate with people like the last speaker before lunch or their organisation. But we can take a leadership role if we can really try and look at that. I suppose one of the things that I'm interested in, of course, now I've done it again. I'm supposed to be an electronic person, aren't I? But I'm not. You know, we can talk about 5 minutes. 5 minutes? I can't believe it, I've nearly finished. That's fantastic. So we'll just go through here. I suppose one of the things we were that sort of come up is if we can really understand the impact of things like grammar and punctuation and all those things that make life a little easier to help communication in organisations. That's another neat and tidy situation, and we don't need to go into how much poor communication is costing us and all of those maybe more technical areas. But as I said, I'm really concerned about leadership and understanding. So often in the organisations I've worked in, people have been really excellent at something and they've been promoted to be a manager. And all the other people in the practical area have gone ahead and risen through their careers, but these managers don't get trained. And I'm wondering how much that doesn't help us. So I'm just going to click through here and cover this. This particular George Bernard Shaw impresses me, and the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I'll just say that that's really around how do we question and listen, and if I'm talking to you today, all of you will go out of this room with a different picture in your mind unless I really confirm what we're talking about. That's very important. Like this morning when the poor guy brought my breakfast to me and I ticked poached eggs only, so that's all I got was a plate with 2 little poached eggs floating on it. And so I was a bit silly, wasn't I, not communicating properly. I'm not sure that this is the only way that we learn to write, but we have heard today about finishing off. If you know, we are in an electronic age, and let's make sure we read about things before we send them. But the other side of this coin is about thinking, about what we're saying, like having a strategy. So that was my story today, communication strategies in health. It's much broader than just systems and procedures. And so I'd just like to really say thank you, and the inspiration that you've given me is going to be very valuable for me in my life and my family, and I think I would love to be a part of striving for better things with you all.